Okay, we're going to roll into the next set here, and this is implementing an infrastructure to serve secure data to ArcGIS Online. And we have a couple of co-presenters here. We have Meredith Moore. Meredith recently moved into the GIS system administrator role with the City of Charlotte in December 2016. Prior to that, she managed implementation of web and mobile GIS solutions as mobile applications administrator for Charlotte Water. She's got her Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Erskine College and then did 11 years with Mecklenburg County Water Quality, and that led her to get her Master's in GIS from Penn State. We also have Rob Bailey. He's the Content Delivery Manager for Charlotte Water and is a PLS here in North Carolina. He's got his bachelor's in geography from UNC Charlotte in 1998. He's been working with Charlotte Water IT Division for 15 years and has worked with GIS for 18 years. And his team provides support for GIS, AutoCAD, document management, and other business systems for Charlotte Water. There you go.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for that great lead-in, asking about secure data and how to.
Water data.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're in a similar situation, City of Asheville, with Charlotte Water. We primarily do water, wastewater services, and in our business plan every year we have a measure called enabling the mobile workforce. So what we're faced with is in getting secure data or our water data out to the mobile workforce, whether it's inspectors, meter readers, construction crews. So we get our information out to those crews so they can perform their work, but we need to come up with a way that we can actually secure that data, but we want to still take advantage of ArcGIS Online. So what we want to present, we're going to try and cram a several-month project into about a 20-minute presentation. So if we start getting a little out of control, talking too fast, let us know. But to give you a little background, Charlotte Water, we are a city department within the City of Charlotte. Again, we're primarily a water utility, water and wastewater services. We serve the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County and a few areas outside of Mecklenburg County, so a pretty large service area. We support, within Charlotte Water, we have our own IT group, and we support our own business operations or business applications more specific to what we do at Charlotte Water. So it may be work in asset management, GIS data specific to our department, and other billing systems, other information like that. So our water and sewer data is within our own database within Charlotte Water, and then we use that, maintain that on a daily basis with our technicians within Charlotte Water. The City of Charlotte, they have an IT group that provides basically enterprise services for the City of Charlotte. They also manage the enterprise GIS for the entire city. So they create things like the base map layers, the enterprise servers for the city. And at the time we did this project, Meredith was with us within Charlotte Water, but as of last December, she moved into this enterprise GIS manager for the City of Charlotte and serves in that role now.
So I'll talk about what got us to do this project. Since we used to share the same DMZ environment, the whole segregated external environment that was separated from our internal GIS servers like they were talking about. So we had a whole system where the city does, and we used to share with them and use their enterprise resources to serve out that data to the field. When I came to Charlotte Water, that was one of my main focuses, was getting our field users to be able to use this, because it used to be they'd have to use VPN to access our secured services. That's another login step. No one can remember how to. I'm sorry, let me get a little bit closer to the, is this better? Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So one of the issues we had with our mobile users is it was another authentication step if you had to use VPN. So we wanted to be able to use, have our services outside and not have to use that VPN, so in a DMZ environment. So as I started rolling that out with our users, we're using that enterprise environment to serve our services. We just became a resource hog. It took off really quickly, and we started using more and more server power on the enterprise servers. We used to have half the ArcGIS Online accounts in their organization. And as we started adding more users and consuming more sources, the performance started degrading pretty quickly. And we had customers, our own internal customers, our users, were so frustrated with the whole system, they were just abandoning. They were using Collector Explorer mainly in the field, and they were just quit using it because they were so annoyed with the performance. So we wanted to be able to help them do their jobs more effectively. So we undertook this project. So, and also another thing I had on that last bullet point was I was constantly contacting the city enterprise GIS resources, which is now me actually, and bugging them about, hey, I noticed the DMZ's down again. Is there a problem? What's going on? And now I'm that person, but I know that we were a pain point for them. So we were creating more problems, and then we were harassing them about them. So this was to try to take the pressure off them as well and provide better service for our users. And Rob will tell you more about the overall system architecture.
So when we started the project, we knew we wanted to be as independent as we could and, like you said, disperse the resources so that we could provide that load balancing. So what we did with this project is the 3 servers to your right, the 3 ArcGIS servers there, those were really the new servers that we implemented as part of this in the DMZ area. The other servers, the external enterprise geodatabase server, the Active Directory servers, and our internal enterprise geodatabase server, those were already there. So it was a matter of getting these 3 servers in place and then getting them connected and working and talking to these other servers for authentication and to get to the data. The other thing we did was we wanted to create those 3 servers to create load balancing. So those 3 servers actually appear as one server. So when users come in and hit, they might get to the first server or the third server. It just depends on what load is on that current server. So that also provides a lot of redundancy for the system as well. So we'll talk about the more individual pieces in more detail as we go through.
And we call them our 3 redundant servers because it's 3 servers that are redundant. So the way the data management is currently in place is on ESRI's recommendation, we actually have local file geodatabases on each server that are isolated so that those are quicker for performance instead of going back to that enterprise SQL geodatabase every time for all the map services. So any feature services for editing in the field, those still need to be on to connect back to that enterprise DMZ enterprise geodatabase because feature services have to have that for editing. So to keep that data current, we have 1-way and 2-way replications scripted every night to run. 2-way for the stuff that's collected and edited in the field and needs to be pushing updates inside the firewall. And also we do some in-office editing on those same layers that pushes back out to the mobile services. And then we also have 1-way replication every night pushing out those production data sets from internal environments. So as they make edits to the pipes in the distribution system each day, the ArcGIS technicians, those edits are pushed out overnight so that they're live for our users in the field. So you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So these are a few components we factored in while we're trying to make secure services. So we knew that we wanted to build a way to create an SSL connection so that we can encrypt passwords, data going back and forth. We initially thought about buying our own domain name, our own certificate, and that just got to be a lot more to maintain. So what we did is the city has a wildcard certificate. So anytime we wanted to add a URL to that ci.charlotte.nc.us, we could just use their wildcard certificates. That's what we did. We just created one called CLTW Maps for Charlotte Water Maps. One thing we learned before this, though, through our SSL connection, and we had to change that, if the Y coordinate of one of our features got out to a 16-digit number, it thought it was a credit card number, so it would send it through as asterisks, and ArcGIS really didn't know what to do with that. So that was something that was interesting to find. So if you've ever installed ArcGIS server, you know that you've specified the account in which the application runs under, that service account. So if you go back into services, you can see what account it's using. So what we did is we created a domain account within our CMUD domain. Our Charlotte Water used to be called CMUD, so you'll see that in several places.
Charlotte Mecklenburg Utilities Department.
Yes. And to some people, will always be CMUD, and according to our Active Directory domain name, will always be CMUD. So that we're using that account to actually go back through and do all the authentication. One thing we learned that account, to make it so that it can actually authenticate users, is in Active Directory, you have to give it an LDAP binding. So when you give it the LDAP binding, then it can actually authenticate those users. It's not just a read-only view into Active Directory to see users or groups. So what we did, if you notice early in that diagram, we had those 3 servers, and we said we wanted those to appear as one server or as one service to the external users. So we're using an F5 load balancer. The city already had that in place. So that load balancer serves several different roles. It serves as a firewall. It serves as the failover load balancer, or as failover. So if a server is not available, it'll just go on to the other one if it's too busy.
So a little bit more about how that F5 is configured. We chose to go this route because the enterprise was using Web Adapter, which is I'm managing now, and it's not really working out as you would hope. So we decided to use an existing resource with the city of the F5 load balancer to do that balancing instead. So I had to do a lot of configuration since this was the first time we'd done it within this environment at the city. So we had an F5 guy, Mark, that we worked with on this, and we had to, through trial and error and a lot of troubleshooting, to figure out the settings that we needed So first of all, we had all incoming requests to port 80 are just redirected to 443s for HTTPS. So that's the external, the public-facing side. Internally, it's only listening on port 6443 for HTTPS only for the ArcGIS server. So all of our web services are served out as HTTPS. So we also had to set the idle time on the server. Well, the idle time on the services is already a default of 30 minutes, but the F5 timeout default was 3 minutes. So you'd get timing issues to where the F5 would end a session, and that was a nightmare of troubleshooting through server logs. We found that a user would make a request to one of the servers. The server, they would get authenticated through Active Directory, which we'll explain a little bit more in a second, and it would pass the token back. So the user's authenticated and they have their token. Well, they'd make another request in the actual map service, and the F5 would send it to another server sometimes, about 50% of the time. So the server didn't know who they were, so they just, didn't display any. It would not give you any error messages. It simply would not draw the layers. But I could see in the server logs that they'd authenticated on the server, and then the token was taken back to this other server. So we had to change the persistence from, I think it was set to cookie, was the default. I'm not an F5 person, but he had to set it to source address and match across. And that way, so that kept the same IP source, it would match that request back to the same node. Also, another thing we had to do was the F5 actually sends out a request and polls each server every second, half a second, some crazy frequent rate. So to make sure they're all still up. And we're trying to figure out what's the best way to know if a server is still up. Is it if IIS is still running? Well, not necessarily. That's a pretty big one. But what about an ArcGIS server? We tried to see if that service was still running. But you could still have that running and still services could be down. So we actually have it hitting the manager website, trying to load that. And as long as it'll load that, it keeps the server in the rotation. And if it goes down, it just takes it out. And it'll keep repolling. So it'll just configure or take it down to take servers out of the rotation as needed. As far as actual map service security, we kept mentioning authenticating back to Active Directory. So it's kind of a three-part setup we have here. Well, first of all, we have the users, as they request, they enter the credentials. So they're coming in from the public-facing, the internet side, from web-facing with mobile apps or desktop browsers. They're coming in. The request for authentication goes back inside the firewall to the CMUD, Charlotte Water, Active Directory domain controllers. There's 3 of them, the CMUD round robin, we call it. So, and again, that's kind of another redundant environment where it goes to whichever Active Directory server is up, and it authenticates that user. So they're authenticated, they have their token, they come back. And then I had to configure the ArcGIS server, the identity store configuration. So I'll show you a little bit more how we have it set up. So this is when you're actually an admin to set up your identity store. So the user store, we have Windows authentication. So that way it goes back to the domain controllers and it gets all of those users in the CMUD domain. But for the role store, ideally you should be able to use Active Directory groups. That didn't work out. We'll go into more detail about that in a minute. So I had to actually manually build those as a built-in. So I used the ArcGIS server built-in role. So now I actually have to manually add users to each of those, the user role, to be able to access the services. So that way we have anybody in the CMUD domain, the Charlotte Water domain, can access and edit our services who's been added to that role by me. So that's a pretty good start to narrow down who can access it. The way the city did have an enterprise, with an older version of 10.2, you could do a can authenticate. So it would go back to one domain controller that had all the city domains in it, which is, we got the airport, police, fire, they all have their own domains. So anybody who could authenticate with a valid credentials, we could get in. So this narrows it down to just Charlotte Water's people. So to narrow that even further about who could actually access different services, sure, a GIS super user could log in on the REST endpoint, could get that web service, publish it out in a map, and edit it. But for the general user, we use ArcGIS Online groups for this. So we got our own Charlotte Water ArcGIS Online organization. And the setup specific groups, this is just to show some examples of what we have. So I'll set up a web map and just grant it to those particular users as named users, and they can access and edit their stuff. So that's what they see. Oh, yes. And as he just pointed out, we have OCCLS contractors, Lawrence Surveying, Fraser Engineering. So these are contractors that have CMUD Charlotte Water domain accounts, contractor accounts for the city. So they're valid users, and we give them named user accounts in ArcGIS Online as well. And that way, so they can access our data securely. but we can also just cut them off as needed. We could deactivate their ArcGIS Online account. The Charlotte Water or the city can cut off their domain account if they're no longer employed with the contractor. But they also sign an information security agreement as well. But this is a good way to serve out our data securely to contractors externally. Our client applications, like I mentioned, mainly of our people in the field are using Collector and Explorer. We also have some of the locates contractors. Since Google Fiber is going in Charlotte, we had a vast increase in our locates that we have to do. So we hired a contractor to help take some of the load off of our staff for that. And they are actually accessing our as-builts that way, because that's what they're coming in for every time they would request prints for our as-builts to see where they're digging. So we're using this to serve that out to them as well. We found Explorer, which I'm going to show you in a second, is best to view attachments. Let's see. So this is Explorer. You can see there's a connection. So this is what the user would see. And we have attachments in this feature class running on our server. This is actually on the enterprise geodatabase servers. This is a feature service with attachments. And so they're out in the field. They know where they are. They pull up so quickly the sheet reference. So this is our scanned as-builts for that area. And they can see whatever they need to see, like so. So that's the primary use for our contractors. And we also have field users who are using it just to see all of our assets. Like this is our water and sewer data here. And it's on those external servers and no VPN. So I'm just authenticating back with just the app. So one issue with that here in red is that Collector and Explorer do store credentials by default. So mobile device management is a critical piece of that, of our security for this, because what's the point in securing everything with Active Directory if you're going to just have it on your phone and get right in if you lose your phone? So at a minimum, our AirWatch mobile device management we use throughout the city, it enforces a screen passcode. So you've got 4 digits at least that you have to enter, and also enables a remote wipe from the city. So if somebody loses their phone, there's a chance we get it back. The phone will get locked, bricked, wiped. So that's a critical piece of security. We also do random audits for AirWatch to make sure everybody is still enrolled, that their device is they can still ping it and see that they're still actively enrolled. And they just have an understanding that you have to have the mobile device management in order to access these things. So next steps.
So now that we have our environment stable and up and running, we're starting to look at other ways to reduce opportunities for it to go down or cause problems. So one of the things we're looking at now is those domain controllers. If you notice, those were inside of our internal firewall. So it's having to make that jump through the firewall. And we've experienced times with that firewall's down for maintenance, or if there's something else that's going on. Or riots in Charlotte, getting a lot of hits. Yeah, so it turns out our site was getting a lot of hits at that point, so they were actually taking things down intentionally. So to avoid that, any downtime on our system, we actually have domain controllers within the DMZ. So we're going to actually start to validate with those domain controllers. So it's one less hop through that last firewall, so hopefully one less opportunity for it to go down. Also, we're looking at using ArcGIS Online with the Microsoft Azure cloud. The city has a subscription with Microsoft. It's a limited subscription, so we're starting
budget version.
Yeah, so we're starting to try and work with the tools that we have and see what we can actually set up out there and authenticate back through. So we're hoping to do this kind of a single sign-on, where right now our users have to sign on with their ArcGIS Online account, but again, it's remembered, but it's just a separate account they have to remember. Then they authenticate using their domain account. So we're hoping that eventually that'll actually make it so that they just have one account for ArcGIS Online and their domain account. So also we're looking at hosting some of our servers out in this Azure cloud for the city. It's basically a private cloud that we have with the city, and there's VPN connections out to that cloud.
And the city's DMZ enterprise, the environment that I'm managing now, we're looking at having to rebuild that, and we're seriously looking at hosted and cloud things with ESRI because it's just too big to maintain right now. So lessons learned, lots of things that just aren't documented by ESRI or others. So, for example, like iOS and Android authentication, that was a fun one to figure out. So whenever the user has to authenticate, they provide their CMUD Charlotte Water credentials, and there would be like CMUD_NTO1 / and then your username. Well, that works with iOS just fine, but Android randomly just wouldn't let you in, but it wouldn't lock you out. So you knew, if you try to authenticate back and you got the wrong password, it'll lock you out after 3 tries. 3 tries. So, but it wasn't locking me out, so I knew it wasn't a password issue, but I figured out, looking through the server logs, it needed an extra character in front of that string for the domain, which is random. It could be any character, but it just strips everything off that after the character. So also the AD groups, we were really excited about the possibility of using that. We're like, oh, with 3 redundant servers, we can just add users to an AD group, and that's going to drop right into the role, and you're good. And it did not work. We used escalated ESRI support ticket. They looked at it, thought maybe some of our users weren't valid, and that was causing the whole thing to fail. Ultimately, we went into Dev Summit and tracked down some of the lead developers for server. They said that using roles, AD groups for the roles, sends a flood of requests through your firewall, and it's probably our firewall policy that's blocking that. And they're trying to minimize that number of requests that are going through with 10.5. But right now, I mean, that wasn't really a thing that we could do. So I know we're in 10.3.1 on server right now, but 10.4, I think single cluster mode is a default. So technically, you can, have one site they all go back to, and you can make edits, add users, and then it pushes out. But it's really just been easier just to log onto each server and add a user, so it's kind of annoying. I want to script out or make a little HTML, just a little page to be able to update these users for each server. That's my next plan. So also, you just have to plan a lot of time with your IT staff. I hear a lot of people say in a lot of these presentations, you're trying to work without IT, trying to avoid having to deal with that. And I understand, because I am IT now, for one thing. But they have a job, and they have best practices, and they have them for a reason. So we have to work closely with them and give them time to get the job done as far as port exceptions for all these requests coming through. So yeah, it was a lot of time. So if you want to see the real monster diagram, this is how everything actually works. It's a bit much, but I just put it in there. So it's showing how the F5's load balancing come back into our internal servers, domain controllers. We have some staging servers that are pushing out jobs and base map tiles each day. We actually go to the city's my servers and copy out base map tiles and then distribute them to each server each night. So yeah, and then Rob and I had to have port exceptions, so the only ones who can get out there to those servers right now. That's really about it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else, John? I think we covered it. Questions? Nothing. It was that clear, I guess, right? Really not complicated at all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a short answer why web adapter is kind of failing?
Is there a short answer for it? I couldn't give one. He asked if there was a short answer for why web adapter was failing. I don't have one right now because I just started managing that enterprise environment 2 months ago. I'll have more of an idea soon. A lot of it for them might just be we've got differing versions that are running. It's just not an ideal setup, and we're going to clean that up right now. But we just decided to try to go with another resource instead of having, basically with web adapter on one web server, we were creating another point of failure instead of having more interface with the F5. So all the requests can just come from there because they're going to have to go through that anyway because it's the firewall. So we figure we just take out another layer. Is that a good answer? Anything else?
How many users, you said you're manually entering users and removing users from ArcGIS Manager?
Yes. So we're doing.
How many would you say you have in there now?
The requests are sporadic. Right now, our ArcGIS Online org has 180 users in it. We're going up to the 250 level with this next ELA renewal in July. So, but yeah, right now we have 180. So those users that were originally in the city's org, I could just batch upload them with a CSV when we first set up. That was the good thing about this environment. It was all brand new. So there was no switchover. It was our dev and test environment in production because it was all brand new. So we didn't have to worry about taking anything down in the meantime. So we could just set it all up and I won't say take our time with it, but we didn't have to worry about killing things in the process because we had another environment in place. But yeah, so we just migrated all those users, and that switchover was difficult because there's named users in one org to named users in another org. And there's not a good way to just reassign them, or there wasn't at the time through ESRI, so we had to actually just kill those accounts and create new ones and get everybody migrated over. So, but yeah, it took off. We had started with 120, went up to 180 pretty sure. We got an org with 150 and immediately had to start buying more users. So, because the performance has been incredible. I mean, our users were so pleased because And I've got, of course, since it's just running just our stuff and it's just three servers that are all ours and all just Charlotte Waters, I've got those instances maxed out. It's like 8 everything's just, running, very good availability. So they're always ready, always on.
Before we moved, well, I guess there's still a lot of them out there. The city servers actually have 270 map services per server. And we were just adding to that. So fortunately now that we pulled our data off into our own environment, that's relieved a little bit of that demand. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You're using 3 ArcGIS server licenses, is that correct?
Correct. He asked if we're using 3 ArcGIS server licenses. Yes, we are.
Yeah, it's the city of Charlotte has a ELA, and so it's just part of our enterprise license agreement, and so it is factored into that.
But not free.
Yeah.
Do many of your users access the data using VPN connections, or do they all need to?
He asked if anybody has used VPN connections. Currently, no. The way it's set up, no one uses VPN. If you wanted to get to our internal services, you could, and that's the way I have some in-office editing set up for some of these same web maps. We have some users so that I could avoid the whole named user thing for internal. So I got some people collecting some data in the field. They're pushing it back into the office, and these people are ending it to another business system application we have. And so I've got it just have the data replicated back to an internal database, and the services are running off of that, so they can make edits from there. And that way, it's just a link to a web app. And they can make edits, and it pushes the data back out the next night. And that avoids the whole, they don't need VPN, they don't need a named user. It just eliminates that authentication and named user piece and kind of makes it easier on the inside. Yes?
Do you have any integration with your billing system, or just kind of on that off, go back and forth, so to speak?
He was asking if we had any integration with our billing system and our customer service. Currently, no. Not with this, but you could probably speak more about that. We have some extracts running.
Yeah, we do have a couple extracts running that'll take work orders or service orders out of those systems and display it as point features on the map. We also have a separate system in PointLink Pro, and that's geared toward mainly work orders on meters or the ERTs that are used to read the meters. We're working on, we just migrated that to a new platform, but eventually we may look at integrating those two more with GIS.
And one thing we do have, so he mentioned the work order systems. We have CityWorks that our work and asset management team uses. We also have Banner Advantage that another team uses for customer service. We have extracts running, I think it's every 2 hours right now, that pulls that work order data. This is a field investigations map. I didn't have it loaded and ready like I should have. But you can see this is just pulling CityWorks data. So people who are out in the field, they can still get data out of CityWorks. So it's just a read-only look at it. They're not editing CityWorks work orders or service requests, but it's a way to just have an ETL process set up so they can still visualize that data and know what's going on in the field where they're doing the work. So we have that with the customer billing system and with CityWorks right now. And it's a moving window of either opens CityWorks requests or Advantage Banner requested for the last 30 days. So it's not like everything. It's narrowed down a bit. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.